we'll be talking about the work and study or study and work program in Canada. Um, I'll dive right in so that we can be on time. Just a bit of housekeeping. So we will be discussing quite a bit in the webinar this evening, and I know as we go through, you guys may have questions. What I will encourage you to do is to place your questions in the Q&A, and as time permits, I'll try to go through as many of them as I can. And also, as it relates to replays of the webinar, we will be sending out an email with a replay as soon as it's available. So you can look forward to receiving that as well. And yeah, so these sessions we tend to have, these days we're having monthly webinars on different topics based on topics of interest that we're getting inquiries about, based on questions that we're being asked very frequently. And so this is our opportunity to provide you with some level of information so that can help you with one, providing education. So we aspire to educate, we want to inspire you. So we want to educate you first and foremost, right? So you know what your options are if you're looking at whether staying in Canada permanently or migrating, coming to Canada from outside Canada. So there's that. We want to inspire you. We want to have you see the possibilities that exist and how others, whether in the same or similar circumstances of you, as you have gone through the programs and how it has impacted and changed their lives and how it has worked for them. And also so that you can see yourself, right, in their shoes. You can imagine yourself and you can also be inspired. And of course, ultimately, um, help you with achieving your dream or whatever that dream is, whether it is to study in Canada temporarily and go back home, or if that dream is to, become a permanent resident in Canada, whatever that is, we are able to assist. And so the goal of these webinars as well is to help you with doing exactly that. Um, we provide a range of, consultation services. So from initial consultations, we provide full representation where we assist you from start to finish. So from the initial stages to the completion stages of your applications. We also provide assistance with application guidance and reviews. Those services are to a lower extent. The bulk of what we do involves full representation, but we do provide support on different levels with helping you with getting to that point of realizing that dream. Additionally, we also provide services extending beyond study permits. So we assist with work permits, we assist with temporary residence, other temporary residence applications such as visitors visas. We provide assistance with applications for permanent residency. So if you're looking at applying for permanent residence inside Canada, or outside Canada. Family sponsorships. So if you have family members that is able to sponsor you, I think last month we actually did a webinar on family sponsorships. So there are different pathways. In fact, there are over 80 pathways that are available to coming to Canada. And these pathways are open to both individuals inside and outside Canada, right? So there are different ways that you can go about this, and the pathway that's available for you is going to look very different for somebody else. It's going to be different for each individual. So bear that in mind as well. So this is the one that we'll be covering today. The pathway of studying and working as a pathway to as a means of getting permanent residence in Canada, but it's not the only pathway. So I will put that out there, and then the information that we will be providing is for general information purposes only. And to see this information in your specific context and in the context of your application and that of your family, then that's where you might need additional support through consultation or, application support or both. So bear that in mind as well. So I will I will get started. All right, so a bit about me. I am Kay Wilson. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I'm the founder and lead consultant at Northern Connections Canada Immigration. And as I mentioned, we're based here in Regina. So our office is located in downtown Regina, Saskatchewan. And from here, we serve clients in over 30 different countries. So we provide representations to clients both within Canada as well as outside Canada. So our client base is, I would say it's very wide and varied. And as I mentioned, the application types that we tend to work on in terms of application support. So as an RCIC, a regulated Canadian immigration consultants, we can provide assistance to clients across Canada. So we're not limited to, even though we're based in Saskatchewan, our services are not restricted to those who are in or coming to Saskatchewan. Our services can be provided to anyone in any province and, of course, as well as outside Canada. Um, I have a website on the screen, and that is the website to the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. And this is the body that regulates the consulting profession in Canada. So essentially, if you are looking at, doing any sort of Canadian immigration applications and you will be working with a representative with that application, IRCC will only recognize consultants that are members of the college, right? The CI college, which is CICC for short, College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. And on this screen, I have a link to their website, which I usually like to highlight whenever I do these sessions. Um, the the link on the screen is a link to their website where they have a public register. And on that public register, there is a list of licensed immigration consultants. And so this is how you can do your own verification of who it is that you're working with. And you can see whether they are authorized to represent you with any immigration application. Also note, if an agency that you're working with is not a member of the of CICC, whether they're inside or outside Canada, then chances are they're not licensed to be providing you with any immigration advice. And if IRCC is aware of this, then it can have negative consequences. It will, if they're aware of it, it will have negative consequences for your application. So bear that in mind, right? There was a recent case that I saw where an individual applied for a certain status. This person is outside Canada, and they applied for a certain status in Canada. They used the services of a representative. It so happened that this representative was not an authorized representative. They were not a CIC member, so they were not an RCIC. Um, I don't know if it's a travel agent that they use. So newsflash, travel agents are not supposed to be preparing Canadian immigration applications because they're not recognized as authorized representatives with the government of Canada, right? And so this person used the services of an unauthorized person, and immigration found out about it. So IRCC was aware of that. And what they did two things. They refused the application on that basis, and they also banned the applicant from applying for any Canadian immigration programs for 5 years. So that's where they were subject to what's called a misrepresentation ban. So that's what happened. And they became aware of this because the agency that the individual worked with would have submitted the application. They may not have disclosed in that application that the person was working with them or working with an agent. However, they would have used payment details. So the credit card or whatever payment method they used to pay for the application was common among a number of applications, right? And so, of course, IRCC digged further into that, and they uncovered that all of these people were in fact working with this particular agency who did not disclose that they were working with these people. They were not authorized to represent them with IRCC, and so as a result, they all would have been subject to the same decision, a refusal and also a ban. So bear that in mind when you are working with anyone. Always verify using the public register that's available online through the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. And then also, even if the person is listed on the website as, a licensed immigration professional, you also want to do your individual research as well and make sure that you know who you're working with. And then we have our license number there on the screen, and so you can also take note of that. Okay, outside of what I do through Northern Connections, in terms of immigration, I also work with different agencies. So I work through the CPA Canada as a member, and I mostly do a lot of their financial literacy trainings. So I do a lot of their financial literacy trainings to Canadians of different groups. So they have trainings targeting newcomers, for example. So new immigrants in Canada, seniors in Canada, and entrepreneurs in Canada, different groups. So they will have different financial literacy programs that are targeting different segment population. So I assist with a lot of those trainings. Um, I'm a member of Women in Entrepreneurs Saskatchewan and one of their ambassadors. And then I'm also a member of the Canadian Association of Professional Immigration Consultants. And I am also a licensed foreign worker recruiter with the government of Saskatchewan. Okay. So that's a little bit more about myself. And I would love to know a little bit about you guys. So I'm gonna launch the first poll here, and I would love for you all to participate. All right, so I'll give you guys a minute to do this, and I'd love to hear why do you want to come to Canada? And that would also apply if you're inside Canada. Like, if you're here, it means that it's either yourself or somebody that you know wants to remain in Canada, right? And so why is that? I'm gonna pick more than one. I'll give you guys a few more seconds. All right, so I'm gonna end this poll so that we can keep going. And I'll also I'll share the results as well. So I see about 70% of you, better quality of life was selected. And then, that's like the majority. And then the rest, I guess, at 10% safety and security for family, 9% world-class education for children, 8% I just love Canada, and live in a multicultural society. Awesome. Okay. Thank you for participating. All right. So I'll go to why study in Canada. We're talking about studying and working and these are usually some of the main reasons. I mean, I deal with a number of study permit applications every year, and we encounter clients from different places, different walks of life, and these are, these are the reasons usually why they want to come to Canada. Education. Um, World-class education with qualifications being recognized around the world. I mean, and world-class will be, subject to what it is that you want to do, right? Canada is definitely somewhere that specializes in a lot of sectors. Like Canada has individuals and companies where they are world leaders in their field. So it depends on the field, but generally overall good quality education. You'll also find that the majority of Canada's population are actually educated. So there's not a lot of uneducated people in Canada, to put it that way. The bulk of the population in Canada is actually educated. So that you'll find being different from, a number of different first world countries, like even with the US, right? When you look at the percentages, Canada is definitely higher. Affordable tuition and cost of living compared, and I'll say compared to other countries, because as a foreign student and international student, it's still very high. I'll put that right there. But compared to other countries, it's still, I would say, affordable compared to some of the other destinations. Multicultural and diverse classrooms, definitely Canada will be the number one there for diversity and, with different ethnicities represented, not just in the classroom, of course, but in the population as a whole. Healthy and safe communities, tolerant and welcoming. Canada is ranked consistently by the UN as one of the best places to live. So every year, Canada is usually within the top four countries as best place to live based on UN rankings. And then, of course, with studying in Canada, it presents the opportunity for you to apply for, apply to become a permanent resident in Canada. So that still remains a possibility, despite even some of the changes that you might be hearing about, which I'll touch on as we go through. And then, of course, other benefits of the pathways, the opportunity to work while you study. Currently, international students can work for up to 24 hours per week. So that was, recently increased from 20 hours per week. They have the opportunity to work full time after graduation. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this. Your ability to um, your ability to work full time after graduation, of course, will hinge on the program that you do in Canada. The opportunity for family to accompany you to Canada, so family meaning spouse and children, um, can accompany you. There have been changes as it relates to spouses coming and how they can come, and now that's more. Previously, it was for any program. Now it's tied into the type of program that you're doing. And then pathways to permanent residency, that remains huge, especially this year where the government is placing more emphasis on that in Canada focus and the goal of helping to transition temporary residents. So temporary residents would include um, students and workers in Canada. So the goal of transitioning them from that status to permanent residency, they see them as very prime targets to become permanent residents. So of course, they're using that opportunity to help them to transition. And somebody's asking about spouse. Yeah, so spouse meaning whether you're married or you're in a common law relationship. So you don't necessarily have to be married. A common law union is also recognized in Canada. All right, so I'm gonna have another poll for you guys. So we're really gonna participate today. Um, so my second poll is regarding not with some of what I mentioned. Are you considering studying? Like why are you here tonight? I know we'll have, a diverse group here tonight, and I see, give you another second with the poll. All right, I'll give you guys a few more seconds. Okay, all right, so I'm going to end the poll, and I see about 53% are considering studying, and then the rest, for the most part, they are either undecided or they're looking to work. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share here the current. So these are the current immigration numbers in terms of the immigration levels. So every year, Government of Canada releases their immigration levels targets, and it covers usually a 3-year period. And so for this most recent immigration plan, these are the numbers. If you look at the last line, you'll see the numbers for students. So the planned numbers based on the immigration levels plan is 305,900. So that's still very high in terms of the numbers for students, right? So this is what they plan to allocate. As of this year, this is actually the first year that they're actually planning temporary resident numbers. Previously, temporary resident numbers were not planned or capped. They were just there, right? So now they're saying, okay, we need to actually plan these numbers and, have caps in terms of how many we will admit into Canada for each year. So these are the numbers that were released. As you can see, it remains the same for right now for the next 3 years. I know this will definitely change. Um, the overall arrivals, though, for temporary residents, as you can see, 673, 516, and then 543. So the plan really is what they came up with was to reduce the numbers for this year. Um, and then you will see, well, reduce the numbers for this year into next year, right? So 2025, 2026, the overall plan was to reduce those numbers, and then the goal is that by 2027 they will be able to um, increase them marginally each year until they have they're able to go back to what the usual numbers are. But to be honest, these numbers in themselves are high, right? So I don't necessarily see them as a reduction. They're a reduction from the 500,000 that we were seeing previously. However, they are still on the high side for temporary resident numbers. As well, Canada is now trying to plan immigration a lot better in terms of the immigration levels should be consistent with the infrastructure planning, right? So as they plan communities, as they plan cities, as they plan housing, as they plan healthcare and social services, the goal is to have, immigration numbers align with that plan, and that was not happening before. And so now with these numbers, what the government is saying, we're taking a step back to take a step forward. Okay, so we want to control the numbers a lot more. And then in doing so, we can plan all of these infrastructure support so that when we have both temporary and permanent residents coming into Canada, they can settle successfully. They have the resources available that they need. And, Canadians as well who are already living here, don't have to suffer as a result of the increase or the influx of people into Canada without the infrastructure to support that. So that's kind of like the the idea behind planning these numbers, releasing a plan for temporary residents, and also adjusting the numbers, reducing them based on what was previously released. Okay, so in terms of this year, study permits to be issued in 2025, and this graph gives you an allocation by province. So there's a breakdown here. There's a breakdown here based on the province, right? So I know the numbers I just showed you was 3059. Um, however, we have some different numbers here, so now and I'll explain. So this is we have 437,000 being the number of study permits that they actually plan to issue in 2025. All right. So I know we have, based on the immigration plan, they had that 305,900, but the number of study permits that they actually plan to issue this year will be that. And this will take into account the planned numbers for 2025 plus anything that would have been for 2024. Because with 2024 application, they will have an inventory of applications that they would have received in 2024 that would not have been finalized in 2024. Plus, they would have the allocation for 2025, right? That they will have to also accommodate. So, with all of that, the number of study permits that will be issued in 2025, the target is 437,000. Now, in terms of provincial allocations, right, now they have gone ahead and now they're allocating the study permit quotas by province. Like I said, this plan was not previously in place, and this is all new as of 2025. And so we have 505,162 as the number of provincial allocation. Um, so of course there is a gap right there, right? So we'll see what happens when IRCC reaches this 437,000, right? So that's for this year, and the numbers have been broken down by province. So they have allocated, as you can see, like Ontario, for example, 181,500, Canada's most populous province, right? So they have 181,000 of that number. Quebec, which is the second most populous one, with 162,000. And then the rest is distributed among the other provinces. 47,000 for Alberta, 76,000 for British Columbia. So that is the allocation. Saskatchewan has 17,641, Manitoba 18,591. And then we have the territories as well. They have their allocations as well. So the Yukon territory 464 and so on. So that's the breakdown of the provincial allocation. And with this provincial allocation comes the provincial attestation letters, right? So, and based on, based on the trend, I can say I don't believe like all of the provinces will reach their full allocations for the year. Um, and we get into those details, but I don't believe they will. They will all reach that. But that being said, what will be issued and approved this year by IRCC will be 437,000. So this means that they could receive more than 437,000 applications, but only 437,000 would be issued. That's the max. Um, and if they receive, say by the end of the year, IRCC reaches this quota, it doesn't mean that they're going to return the applications, right? It means that if your application is not processed within this year's quota, it could be processed in the next year's quota. So they may not make a decision on those applications by the end of the year. If they're already at their target, it means that those applications would be in the 2026 numbers and not 2025. All right, guys. So I'm going to poll you guys again. I would love to know in this next one, I'd love to know where in Canada you're thinking of studying. So if you're here and you're looking at studying as a possibility, where do you plan to go? I give you guys a few more seconds, more than one option. That's okay. That's okay. It's always good to have options. Okay, so I'm going to end this poll and I see 55% of you not familiar with the places there. Okay. 55% of you are looking at going to Ontario. Then another 19% to Alberta. Okay. And then I see 10% to Saskatchewan. That's interesting. Saskatchewan seems to be pretty high. Saskatchewan was always in the lower numbers, I would say. Not at the top tier, but and then the rest is spread out throughout the rest of Canada. All right. Thanks for your participation. So I'll show you where most people have been going to. So this is from the numbers for last year, 2024. And this is data that was released by Statistics Canada that was put together by the Canadian Bureau of International Education. And we are seeing just, I guess, similar to some of it's being similar to even the poll that you guys did, because the majority of you were looking at going to Ontario, right? So Ontario, last year, 49% of international students that came to Canada went to Ontario. We have British Columbia being next with 21%, and Quebec 13%, and then the rest between the other provinces. So we have Alberta, 7% allocation, Manitoba 3%, Saskatchewan 2, and then we have the the East Coast, so the Atlantic region between 1 and 2%. Okay. So that's where everyone went. But I can say this though, when you're looking at Canada as a study destination, especially if your end goal is to be able to get permanent residence after all of that, I would ignore these numbers. I would not necessarily look at these numbers because this will not be representative of the prospects that will be available for you, and I'll go into them shortly, but it will not be representative of what will really be available for you truthfully on the ground. When you get to Canada, you'll find that where you should go, depending on what your goal is not going to be based on this table. I can say that much. But those are the numbers. And then this is also showing you where most students, so obviously this is not going to be representative of all countries. Um, Yeah, it's not going to be representative of all countries where people are coming from to Canada, but these are the top countries, right? So you can see standing out right here is India. And one of the one of the things that the government has recently started doing, they are trying to reduce the number of, students and people coming to Canada from one or two or three particular regions, right? Which is where how it has been historically. So you are seeing 39% from India, and then the rest, 10% China, 5% Nigeria. Nigeria has grown quite a bit over the last few years. It's one of the top five countries for as source countries for those who are coming to Canada. So these are the top countries, but like I said, not representative of all countries in terms of where folks are coming from. And so, with studying in Canada, of course, one of the first things that you need is a study permit. A study permit is required by any foreign national, right, that's coming to Canada to engage in an academic program that is more than 6 months in duration. And that program must be done as what's called a designated learning institution or a DLI. And the the program itself must be um, the duration of that program must be at least 8 months in order for you to qualify for a post-graduation work permit. So minimum of 8 months, right? However, if you're going to study for 6 months or more, you need a study permit. If you're studying for 6 months or less, you actually do not need a study permit, and that's a whole different discussion, right? But this is the case currently. And even though we have professional or vocational education, there are some professional programs and vocational programs where they're not necessarily the institutions offering them are not necessarily DLIs. So even though you could study there, you cannot study there. You cannot get a study permit to study there for those reasons. So there are some nuances as well around that. Um, and I like to share these stories of, clients, past clients. In the past, we've had, even some of our current and past clients have joined us and they are sharing their experiences in coming to Canada, working with us through the application process. So this past client, she worked in Jamaica. So she was from Jamaica. She worked as a bank teller. And after completing her degree, um, she wanted to do something else. She wanted to find, you know, more purpose to living. She wanted to make opportunities for herself. And she found that she was still struggling even after going to school and, doing her degree and all of that. So she was very challenged. And so she decided that, hey, I'm gonna try to make a new start in Canada. And she reached out to us. The option that was recommended to her at the time was to pursue the study permit pathway. So coming to Canada as a student, and of course, with the end goal of applying for permanent residency from inside Canada. She did not have the funds, and that was her biggest challenge, but she was able to get support from her family. She had to get a loan in order to account for the proof of financial resources or proof of funds that are required to make a study permit application. And of course, she worked and she saved towards that. So we ended up doing a master's application. This particular student actually came to Saskatchewan, right? But we have have clients who have gone all across Canada. So she actually did a master's in Saskatchewan. The program that she did had a co-op element. So at the end of the program, she did her co-op term, so co-op, which is a work term. And then in doing that co-op, she was placed with a government ministry. And normally with co-ops though, like with some of these masters co-ops, you're not necessarily placed, right? You actually interview, right? So this you will have an interview with the institution or the organization in the same way as you would finding a job. So she did her interview with a few of the options for co-op placements, and she was selected by the particular ministry. So she got placed with this ministry. And then she did her co-op. After the co-op term, she was actually kept on. And a contract was actually extended to her. Yeah, a contract. A contract was extended to her, and so she was kept on a contractual basis beyond the co-op. And then, of course, following that initial, period of contract, she got placed in a permanent position. So, by way of that employment, she was able to apply for permanent residency. She was able to apply for permanent residency in Saskatchewan. And as a result of that, well, she applied for provincial nomination, I should say. So she was able to apply for provincial nomination in Saskatchewan, and then subsequently she was able to apply for permanent residency. So she got her permanent residency. Didn't take long. All of that for her happened within a 2 year span, right? Applying, but getting, starting to work, applying for provincial nomination and also being granted permanent residency. So all of that happened within 2 years for her. And so right now she's still working with the government in a different ministry. So she was able to, transition to different ministries, and she is now a Canadian citizen. So that was her particular journey. And I wanted to highlight Nikki's pathway and how it worked for her. So, how does all of this work? All right, guys. So, the the pathway, or this particular pathway, starts with having a letter of acceptance from a DLI. Um, Once you have your acceptance letter, then the next step would be to do your study permit application. Now, deciding on your program of study, right? Before you can move on to, a study permit and all of that, you have to first decide what you're going to study. And it's not as simple as just choosing a program. There are different nuances and rules, around that. Um, you may have to think about, so one, the institution that you're going to study at, and these are some of the things I've just listed a few things that you should consider when you're thinking about choosing a particular um, program. You, the institution for one that you choose has to be a designated learning institution. So that's one. Not all designated learning institutions offer programs that are post-graduation work permit eligible. And one of the main benefits really of studying is the ability to work, right? With your post-graduation work permit, you can work full time post studies for various durations depending on the length of the program that you completed. So this is one of the key benefits that you would want to be able to get. So it's very important to choose the right program. Choose the right program, the right institution. And especially with some of the recent changes that have happened, um, not all programs right now are eligible for the post-graduation work permit. So there are certain fields of study that you would need to do your program in, depending on the level, right? So it depends on the level, whether you're doing a graduate program or an undergrad program and so on. So you want to consider your purpose for studying. Is your purpose just to obtain a particular credential? Is it that you want to benefit from work experience in Canada? Is it that you want to obtain permanent residency? So those are, some of the things that you want to consider. You want to think about your career plans. What do you want to do after studying in Canada, or where do you want to take your career? And that would influence where you go, right? If you want to go in tech, for example, there are some provinces where you would not go if you want to get a career in tech because there's, virtually no tech jobs that you'll get in some provinces. Where do you want your career to go would be, I would say, is another factor that you want to consider. So the area of study and the career plans, as it relates to career plans as well, you want to think about your ability to get a job. It might be easier to get a job in some provinces than others. So again, career plans and destination will be important there. You want to think about your background. Um, what background do you have in terms of work experience or even studies? And that will help to influence your choice of program. And this is also important as it relates to the study permit because sometimes in the past, I would say it's not so common. I'm not seeing so many cases of this as before. I think IRCC has somewhat changed their policies, but previously, like doing a study permit program, in a background or in a program or field of study that's completely unrelated to your background could get your study permit refused because you have chosen something that's completely unrelated to what you do or have done, unless you can provide clear justification. Like I said, we're not seeing that as much as in the past, where you see, one of the services that we do is visa refusal services. And this is where we review, maybe somebody did an application themselves and they were refused their study permit or their work permit or their visitor's visa. We have a visa refusal management service where we will review um, for you to see exactly what was the reason for refusal. So we request your case details from immigration, review that with you, and provide you with guidance as it relates to how to overcome that particular refusal. So it's a very popular service that we offer. And in some of those reviews, when we review study permit refusals, for example, in a lot of those study permit application cases, they are refused as a result of the misalignment with their background and the program that they're doing, right? So, um, and then of course various other reasons, but so that's important. Ability to work post studies I touched on. So you want to be able to find a job when you're done your program. So that should be a factor in terms of where you consider your to go. Level of education previously completed, that will determine like level you actually pursue in Canada as well. Province of destination, depending on what you want to do, your province is going to be important, and also your ability to apply for permanent residency will be easier in some provinces than others. So that's where province come in, and of course budget. You'll find tuition rates in some parts of Canada way more affordable than others, right? So these are all factors that will influence what program you do and also where you do that program. Now, one requirement that is more recent is a provincial attestation letter, or a PAL. Um, the PAL is a letter that's issued by the Ministry of Education in the province that you will be studying in. Remember, we looked at the numbers and we saw, I think it was 505,000 that was allocated to the provinces. So this is how the provinces will keep a track of their numbers, um, the number of students that will be coming to their province. Because everyone, you need a PAL basically unless you're exempted, right? And there's not a lot of exemption. Like if you're currently studying in Canada, you might be exempted and so on. If you're studying at primary or secondary level, then you wouldn't need a PAL, but there are not a lot of exemptions. So most people will need a PAL to study in Canada. The PAL basically confirms your space in that 500,000 that's allocated to the province. So it confirms your space with the province that you're going to be studying in, or in the province that you're going to be studying in. All right. So, and of course, the PAL has to be submitted with your study permit application. So this is a sample of what a PAL might look like. This is one that was issued recently. This was issued for the province of Alberta, right? So the Alberta Advanced Education issued this PAL, and the PAL will always have, it's important to confirm like the details of your PAL is important, is correct. So it will have your student name, it will have certain details about you, your name, the program that you're doing, your date of birth, and so on. So it will have your primary details here. And then of course the name of the institution that you're gonna go to, as well as the validity. So PALs expire, right? So you cannot apply for a study permit um, without having a PAL. Okay. So, and then of course it has to be valid when you apply. So if your PAL is expired, then you're gonna need a new one. Okay. Now, how to get a PAL? One is that you have to get accepted into a program. So you need a letter of acceptance. You confirm your spot. This part is important. So the school will not request a PAL on your behalf until you confirm your spot. And your spot is confirmed by paying your deposit, right? When you pay your deposit, then you can request the PAL. Then you can wait. Next step would be to wait for the school um, to request your PAL on your behalf, and then the school will issue the PAL to you, and then you would include that in your application. Okay, and like I said, the deadline of the PAL, the expiration of the PAL is important. So if you were issued one for 2025, for example, and you're no longer gonna study or apply for in 2025, then you're gonna need a new one when you're ready to apply. It's also important to again select and ensure that you're working with the right DLIs and do your checks and so on, do your due diligence. Um, IRCC instituted some new rules for DLIs, and one of them is number 2, must verify your acceptance letters. I have seen applications returned. We have even had some of our clients' applications that were returned to us, so we had to resubmit them to IRCC. They were returned because the school that the students um, got accepted into did not do this one, number 2. They did not verify the acceptance letters. So once your study permit application is submitted to IRCC, the IRCC, before they issue your final study permit, they're going to, as part of the application processing, they will check with the DLI that you are in fact a student there, that you have been issued a letter of acceptance from that school. If that school, and IRCC usually will give them a deadline, so they'll have a deadline by which they need to confirm, right? If the school does not respond to that request, your application is not going to be reviewed, but it's going to be returned. So they will not process the application if the school does not confirm that. And especially, I think it's getting better now, or it has gotten better. In the initial stages when they did this, there were so many students that were impacted because schools were not confirming. So they have a better process in place now, but this is still very important. It's the school's duty to confirm the acceptance letter as part of the study permit application process. Now, next, of course, with applying to study in Canada, you'll need proof of funds. And this is where a lot of students get, a lot of folks get stumped. Like I shared with you, Nikki's story. This was her thing. She didn't think that she had enough funds, but we gave her some suggestions and she was able to get her funds in place and it worked out for her. So if you're coming to Canada to study, and with all applications, there's always a proof of funds requirement. So just bear that in mind. So with the option of studying, one is 20,635. So this is for an individual. So if you're a single person, it's you alone that's going to be studying and coming to Canada, then your proof of funds required will be 20,635. So this is for your living expenses. It does not include your tuition. And as I have here, tuition rates average 15 to 17,000. I would say on average right now. You can find lower tuition rate, even lower than this 15. So maybe as low as 10,000 is where you might be able to find programs in that range. Family members, so 2. So if you have 2 persons on the application, maybe you and a dependent child, for example, that's 25,000. 3 persons, maybe you, a dependent child, and your spouse, 31,000. Maybe a spouse, you, a spouse, and 2 children, 4 persons, so it's 38. So the amount that you'll need in terms of proof of funds will increase based on the number of people that will be applying. And then I have some examples here of, a single person using an estimated tuition of 17,000. So this would show you the minimum funds that you will need based on your family size, right? And remember, your living expense is not just your living expense for 1 year. It's gonna be for the length of your program. So the amount of living expense will increase based on the duration of the program that you will be studying. All right. And so I'm gonna open this up. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about this? Like, paying all your tuition fees increases your chance of success with your study permit application. What do you guys think? Is this a myth? Is it a fact? It's a motivator. That's a good one. Okay, I'm seeing mixed responses. Might be true. Okay. All right. So it is in fact a myth. Paying all your tuition fees increases your chance of success. That's definitely a myth. Um, because IRCC is not necessarily concerned that you have paid your fees. If you pay your like I said, as I showed earlier, you would need to pay your deposit, right, to get your PAL, right, um, from your school. So to confirm your seat. So that's all you really need to pay. You don't necessarily need to pay anything else. Some people may pay their tuition, however, you don't necessarily need to pay it. So it is a myth. It does not increase your chances of success. What IRCC is concerned with is that you can afford to study in Canada. So the cost of studying you can actually afford, meaning the numbers that I just showed you that you need for your, tuition, living expenses, that you have that. So whether you have paid it to the school or not, doesn't matter as long as you can demonstrate that you have those funds. That is all they really care about. Okay, so this brings me to our next poll that I will launch for you guys. And it's a question about, have you ever been refused a visa, work, or study permit for Canada? And somebody says no. Okay. I realize, yeah, no, it's not there. A novelet, yes, we do. You can send me an email. Yes, we do. Okay, no, no, no. Okay, thank you guys. All right, so I'm going to end the poll. I see most of you have never applied, and then we have quite a few no's as well. So that's good. That's a good place to start. And if it's a yes for you, which is 8% of you said yes, even if it's a yes, I mean, it doesn't end right there, right? There's still hope even after being refused. So these are some of the common reasons for refusal, okay, of study permit application. So one is um insufficient or insufficient or or no access. It should be no access to your funds, or no, not demonstrating. Let me say it that way. So as relates to funds, either your funds are insufficient or you have not demonstrated that you have access to the funds that you're showing. Because you could apply for a study permit and demonstrate more than the required funds. But if the officer is not convinced that you have access to these funds, then, they could refuse you on the grounds of finances. So insufficient funds, poor quality documents, believe it or not, like documents that are, illegible, maybe the quality of your scan isn't good, like those can also result in your application being refused. Um, unclear purpose of visit or a weak study plan. And I would lump these two into one. So having a clear study plan is important, not one that's generic. When we actually do a study permit application, we assist with we assist the client with writing that study plan. So we actually help to put that study plan together and ensure that it's touching on all of the key points that an officer will be looking for in an application. Sometimes those study plans range from 3 to 4 pages, right, of written information, and that's a vital piece of document for any application. So we normally assist clients with that. As it relates to even the ones that we touched on previously, which I mentioned, the DLIs and enrolling in the right program, we have a service, in fact, where we assist with um, applying to institutions. So we have schools. So we work with a number of schools across provinces, across Canada, and our team helps clients with getting into programs at qualifying DLIs. So ensuring that the DLI is qualified, is a qualifying DLI, and then also ensuring that the program itself is an eligible program if you want to get a work permit, right? Um, then the last one, ties to Canada or home country. Again, you can be refused on the basis of ties if your ties aren't documented properly. And I can tell you, most people have a lot of ties. So many of us will say, well, I don't have a house, I don't have a car, I don't own, a piece of property or land here and there, so I don't have any ties. But believe me, when um, if we were to sit with you and review all of these things, and that's what we do in a consultation, we are able to bring out and to highlight certain ties that you would never think that you had, right? So you may think that you don't have ties, but generally I find we're always able to find different things for different people. I've had clients. So recently I had a client who had previously applied for study permits unsuccessfully. At this time, she was not employed. She didn't own a property or anything, but we were able to help her with successfully applying for her study permit. So I've had more than one clients who weren't even employed at the time of applying for the study permit, right? But we were able to help them with applying successfully. We've had clients with previous refusal, multiple clients with previous refusal, and some of them multiple refusals. Some of them very complex cases. They may have a history of refusal even with the US or removal or some, negative immigration situation with the United States. And for those who don't know, Canada and the US share immigration information, right? So um, a negative history with the US can impact an application to Canada. So we have helped a lot of clients successfully overcome those. Some of whom have, applied for study permits multiple times in the past. So refusals are definitely, they can be a roadblock, but they don't have to be like a permanent, stumbling block. They can be overcome, and there are ways to overcome them, whether it's a study permit or a work permit or even a visitor's visa. So the next I'm going to touch on is the rules that are now in effect for spousal open work permits. So as of January 2025, Canada introduced new rules around, spouses coming with you to Canada. And I'm going to go through this quickly. Let's see, the time is going. So the new rules means now if you want to bring your spouse to work, so this is specific for those who want to apply for a work permit, because your spouse can come with you to Canada in other ways, right? They could come as a visitor, they could they could come as a student, right? So there are other ways that they could come, but in this particular case, for your spouse to benefit from the spousal work that's available as a result of you applying for a study permit, then you will need to be in one of these three brackets or three groups, right? So you would need to be doing a master's program that's at least 16 months in duration. You will need to be doing certain select professional degree programs. So these are undergrad programs. So like you'll have a degree in education, a degree in nursing, engineering, law, medicine, pharmacy. So all of these professional degrees will make your spouse eligible for a spousal open work permit. And then, of course, those who are doing doctoral programs. So these are the three large groups that you will need to be in order to benefit from the spousal work permit. But there are actually options for spousal work permit. So say you were to study, but you didn't do any of these programs. Maybe you did a diploma. Maybe you did a 2-year diploma. Your spouse still can benefit from a spousal open work permit at the end of your program. So like once you have completed your program, you can benefit, your spouse can benefit from having this the spousal or from applying for the spousal work permit once you have started working. So it will depend on the type of employment you secure, right? So this is how we often work with clients as well. So when they are at that stage, we will guide them regarding the type of jobs to apply for to assist them with qualifying for the spousal open work permit. Okay, so if it's not possible for you while you study, it may be possible for you after completing the program. So that's a whole another thing. Now, in terms of postgrad work permit eligible, so this is the work permit. The post-graduation work permit is the work permit that you can obtain after completing your studies successfully, right? And this is the work permit. It's an open work permit and it allows you to work for any employer, excuse me, any employer in any province in Canada. Okay, so for this, and this is an instrumental document in making that transition to permanent residency. So if your goal is to apply for permanent residency after you have studied in Canada, then you definitely need a post-graduation work permit eligible program. So the to apply for the post-graduation work permit at the end of your program, these are the main requirements. And this is where you're making that transition. You're in that stage where you're looking to transition to permanent residency. So you can do this at any level. So it does not apply only to masters or bachelors. You can do a post-graduation work permit application at any level as long as your program qualifies. So once your program qualifies, you just need to be able to do your language test. So now this is a new requirement. Previously, they didn't need to do an English language test to apply for a work permit, but now they do. So English test, right? And they have the CLB, the Canadian Language Benchmark level based on the type of program. So if you did a college program, for example, it's a low CLB, CLB 5. You do your language test, then you can apply for your postgrad work permit. There are eligible fields of study that will apply, right? So it's important that you are guided as it relates to the choice of program. That's why the choice of program that you choose at the onset of the process is important for when you get to this stage, right? So the program choice is very, very critical. So ensure that you can be guided or you are guided as it relates to program choice from the very beginning. Even if you are in Canada and you are in a program, you can always change it. I have clients right now that we're working with they're in Canada already. The program that they're doing was not a qualifying program. Or maybe the program that they're doing does not allow for their spouse to come with them. And so what we're doing right now is to work with them to help them to find other qualifying programs. So get enrolled in another program with a plan to apply for postgrad work permit and also a plan to bring their families because their families are not with them at the moment. So we are working with some of those clients to help them to make that change in terms of program and then also, long-term planning as it relates to permanent residency. So we do assist with that. And then I'll talk about like some of the current updates that we're seeing right now. So based on, information provided by the new party, the new government, Prime Minister Mark Carney and his cabinet. So these are their immigration policy highlights. So cap on temporary residents at 1% of the population. Currently, Canada's population is around 41 million, thereabout. And so they want to cap temporary residents at 1%. And this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning when you talked about, infrastructure supporting the movement of people into Canada. And so that's the goal right now. But based on the numbers that I have highlighted earlier, um, that 300,000, 400,000 would be within that 1%, right? 1% of population. Restrictions, I've highlighted how spousal open work permit rules have changed, but there's still an opportunity for a spousal work permit by studying particular programs. And then even those who have not studied particular programs, at the end of their studies, when they're on their applying for their open work permits, they can still apply for the spousal work permit at that time based on the type of employment that they're doing. We talked about provincial attestation letters. That's a new requirement this year. We talked about full-time work post studies, which is the PGWP, and how that process has changed. And then access to in Canada permanent residency. So with the in Canada permanent residency applications right now, as I mentioned, the government has, as part of the current immigration plan, they have this sub-focus, which is an in Canada focus. So those who come to Canada as temporary residents, whether it is a worker or a student, they are working on making that transition um, possible for temporary residents. So with that in Canada focus, so being in Canada as a temporary resident actually helps you and increases the opportunity for you to become a permanent resident from in Canada as a result of one, this in Canada focus that they have right now, and then two, the additional programs that will be available for in Canada applicants as opposed to those who are outside Canada, right? So if you're outside Canada, um, the permanent residency programs that are available to you will be less than somebody that's in Canada as a temporary resident. So they have options to more programs. So yes, you have programs that you can apply for directly from outside Canada, but by virtue of being a temporary resident in Canada, you will be able to access more immigration programs. Like I said, there are over 80 programs. Right? In fact, they're closer to more than 100 programs right now, right? But some you will not be able to access as a result of being outside Canada, while some you can. Okay. And then I have another question for you guys. What do you think about this one? And this will, but before I comment, like, what do you think, whether it's a myth or a fact? International students contribute over 37 billion to Canada's economy. What do you think about that? Is that a myth? Is that a fact? All right, I see the responses coming in. Okay, I think most of us are agreeing on that one. Most of us are agreeing on that. So that's definitely a fact. International students contribute over 37 billion to Canada's economy, more than the country's total exports of wood, fertilizers, and these are big crops for Canada, right? Or electronics, and help sustain over 350,000 jobs. So I can say to you, based on this fact, that the study permit pathway is not going anywhere. and it remains a very viable option for coming to Canada. It supports a lot of jobs. It's a big income earner for Canada. I can say even during COVID, right? During COVID, there was virtually no processing of most applications. But do you know what they were still processing? Study permits. They adjusted the study permit program to facilitate people still being able to apply for a study permit to come to Canada and being able to study from their home country, do their programs online, and then come to Canada afterwards, right? So that's the adjustment that they made to continue to sustain that economy, even during a global pandemic where, everything was locked down. So this underscores the importance of this pathway to Canada. It supports Canadian institutions because international students, for some institutions, are the majority of the student population, right? And they pay a lot more tuition compared to domestic students. Domestic students' tuition are actually subsidized by the government, which is why it's much less than what international students pay, right? But this is not going anywhere. And then, of course, as previous immigration ministers have said, that's international students or international graduates. And when I say students, I don't mean necessarily somebody that's coming out of high school, right? Students could be anyone doing a master's, doing a PhD, doing an undergrad program. You could be doing a certificate or a diploma. You are a student, right? When you come to study, that's what you're doing. And of course, like I said, you can both study and work. So you're studying full time and you're working part time for up to 24 hours. The previous ministers have indicated that students are prime targets for permanent residency, and they remain that way. They transition a lot easier. They have Canadian education. They would have been accumulating Canadian work experience while studying. So they, assimilate well into the Canadian society. They have the skills, experience, education that is needed. And that's this pathway remains. And that's why it's one of the most popular ones that's available even today, right? So um, I know a lot of all kinds of information are out there. And so I wanted to highlight that it's still definitely one of those very, very viable options. In fact, to be honest, there are some folks that may not get to Canada without going through this pathway because they may not qualify for the outside Canada permanent residency programs, and they may not be able to find a job otherwise. And so outside of that, this would be the way for them to come. There are some folks that this will be their pathway by default, but you won't know that until maybe we assess your options, right? Um, some may not just have this as a pathway. There will be some of you that will have other options outside of this. But again, we would not know until we assess you on an individual level to be able to advise you, right? Where that's concerned. So it will definitely vary for each individual what pathway will work best for them and what they choose to, which path they choose to undertake and when. I must also address the fact that, like my oldest, I've said this before, if you've attended past webinars, um, one of my oldest clients that I've done a study permit for, she was over 50, right? She already had a master's, she already had an established career, but she needed to come to Canada. She had children that she wanted to create a better future for and opportunity. And so she wanted to leave where she was. She was also from the Caribbean. And she she came, right? She came, she decided on this pathway. This was the one that we helped her with. She applied for a study permit. She already had a master's, like I said. So in her case, what we did was a 1-year program. She didn't need to do another master or anything like that. Like I said, the recommendation will be different for each person, but in this particular client's case, she did a 1-year postgraduate program. And right now, She is in Canada, so she has gone through the, work the program, the study program, the work permit, and right now she is awaiting, permanent residency. So it can work. It has worked for this client and it can work for others. So I wanted to clarify that because I think that's one of the questions I saw as well in the chat, like where somebody mentioned about age. With studying, age is not a factor because you can literally study at any age, right? Um, the details that you put in your application will be important. So that's where, the focus should be. Your age is secondary. It's not a factor in deciding to study in Canada. And this applicant was, and she's not the eldest. Well, she's not the only one, I should say. She's the oldest, but she's not the only one. Um, it should not be your primary concern. This applicant already had a master's and an established career. She didn't even have a travel history. She had never traveled outside of her country before. But again, this was a pathway that worked for her. She was able to successfully complete the program. I had another client who also a mature applicant. She actually had a PhD in her home country. And again, she wanted to come to Canada. She wanted to bring her, she had a spouse and children. And of course, she didn't do another PhD. She didn't do another master's. All we did with her was a 1 year program at the time. And, now she's here, her family's here, her spouse and children are here. She's actually working right now as a principal for an institution in Canada, right? So that's where all of that took her. So it is, it's definitely possible regardless of age. So if age was your primary concern, I would look past that. Um, there are other more important things to focus on, definitely, and it's age is not one of them for this program. All right, so where do I go from here is my final question for you guys today, and I am going to launch a poll. Where do you guys go from here? After which I'm going to take your questions. All right, so I'm going to pull up the questions. I see we have quite a few. Just trying to find it on my screen here while you guys go through that poll. All right, so I see quite a few questions here. Um, all right. I'll see how many of them I can get through. We're actually at our end time, which would have been 6:30. Okay. All right, so I see 38% of you indicated that your next step would be to find a program. Yeah, if you plan to pursue this pathway for sure, just make sure that you are, you're choosing the right program and in the right place. Okay. That would be my only advice where that's concerned. And then the next 34% indicates consultation. If you need consultation with us, we'd be happy to guide you further. Outside of that, I see 12% start job search, and then 6% indicate apply for study permit or credential assessment. All right, so let's see what I can go through question-wise. So Janelle says she's 35 from Barbados, licensed EMT, dream to become a PR in Canada. I'd like to know which route I have to take. Um, Would my certification in Barbados allow me to practice in Canada? Would I have to take a course in EMT to get my license and find a job? Okay. All right. So that's thank you for that question. Very detailed. I would say Janelle that I can or Janelle, it seems, sorry. Um Okay. Yeah, so I see your question, Janelle, and I'll say this that being an EMT, so you're working in, healthcare is a good start. In fact, this year, Canada is once again prioritizing applicants with experience in certain sectors, and the healthcare sector is one. So I think, being in that field is a great start. Um, in terms of the best pathway, there are different options that could work for you. Of course, the study permit pathway is one, right? But there are other pathways that can be explored, and it will depend on other factors. And then you mentioned like coming with your family. um, I would also want to know about your spouse and what they do as well and their background. And then I would also be able to guide you as it relates to license to practice. License, of course, Canada is a big country, and the licensing process will actually be different based on the based on the province that you're going, so the province of destination, right? So coming to Canada, I can say each province often can seem like going to a different country. But yeah, so that would be a factor as well. What I would recommend is sending us an email, or you can go to our consultation page and schedule a consult so that we can do provide you with a more one-on-one um, response to that. I can delve a little deeper into your background, and then I can advise you. And then I'm seeing questions about, is there a fee for a consultation? What's the cost for consultation? We actually have different consultation types. So if you go on our website, nccanadaimmigration.com, you will be able to see and go to consultation. You'll see the different consultation options that we have. Each of them will have a different associated fee. I usually like to share. So let me go here. So on the website, on the screen here, you'll see our website, nccanadaimmigration.com, and you'll see also our contact details. What I will also share with you, I usually offer to those who show up. So if you show up, kudos to you for being here. Um, those who show up to the webinar, we usually offer 10% off consultations, and you can book your consultation for any time that's convenient to you based on the times that are available on the website. But for those who book within 24 hours, normally these coupons are valid. So the coupon itself is valid for 24 hours. You can use that to help to reduce your consultation by that 10%. Um, so that answers those questions. Is it safe to apply for a study permit from inside Canada? You can apply for a study permit inside Canada if you qualify. Not everyone will be eligible to make an application inside Canada. Okay, so it depends on you. This will be also a very individual question and scenario. So not all persons will be eligible. In fact, most people are not eligible to apply for a study permit from inside Canada unless you meet one of the exceptions. That being said, if you are inside Canada, like we just had one for a client who is in Canada as a visitor, um, and he does not qualify to apply for a study permit from inside Canada. So what we did was to apply for a study permit outside, even though he's physically in Canada. So the client did not have to leave Canada, right? So if that's what you're asking. Um, are there mandatory requirements for certain Canadian universities for international students? Um, most requirements are generally the same. I will say though, for people who are looking at undergrad studies, you may need to have CXC CAPE as a student from the Caribbean, for like to get into a bachelor's degree program, for example. I've had clients though in the past who did not have CAPE, for example. Maybe they had a few CXCs, but they did not have CAPE. Um, in that case, what we did with those applicants, we found programs that had a mature entry route, and then we got them into those programs. You won't have a lot, right? There won't be a host of programs, but there are a few programs that will offer that mature entry route, and so it helps you to bypass that CAPE requirement, and so they're able to get into a program. Um, as a mature student, mature meaning over 21, right? So they have to be over 21. And yeah, so some schools offer that. Outside of that, though, there are no other requirements for Caribbean students aside from what, is required for other countries. One thing to note, though, if you're from the English speaking, whether Caribbean or otherwise, generally you do not need an English language test. You might see that on the school's website in most cases, but you do not need one in 99% of the cases. Okay. Um, see some more questions coming in. Okay. Let me just get my team to respond to some of those questions in the chat. Okay, so um do you accept Western Union or MoneyGram for payment of? If you go on our website, the same link that's on the screen, you'll see the payment options there for consultation. But it does not include any of those that you mentioned. We do not do those money transfer services. Um, Enrolling in a private college, is it worth doing it? And would it help getting a work permit? I would not recommend it. I would not recommend it. Um, what if I'm already in Canada studying? Can I apply for PR before graduating? Yes, you can. It depends on your background, obviously, but we've had clients that have successfully done that. So they would have come as international students, and while studying, we did their PR application. So yes, it is absolutely possible. Um, is UK 1 year project management master's qualification accepted in Canada? Yes, it is. I'm a preschool teacher. Can I do an early childhood degree? Yeah, I don't see why not if you can, meet the admission requirements. Early childhood actually one of those in-demand fields right now. Applied for a master's in agriculture, food, and nutritional science, University of Alberta. Deadline was March 15, applied February 28th. I have not received acceptance yet. Is that normal? Yes, that is normal. That is normal, especially for a master's, because master's programs are decided by a committee. So yes, that is normal. And then also for the program that you have applied for, that's a very specialized program. They usually reserve some seats for Canadians and so on. So yes, that's normal. I have a bachelor's of education, special needs major, 12 years experience as a teacher. I wish to get my master's. What do you recommend? Yeah, so in your case, yeah, look at this screen like so this particular code that we have, the webinar special, I should note that it's valid for the study permit consultation. So if you try to use it to schedule a different type, because like I said, we have different types of consultation options there. If you try to schedule a different type of consultation, it's not going to work. It's only valid right now for the study permit consultation. Okay. So in your case, Jewel, I think your next step would be a consultation so that you can be guided accordingly. Um, is Cuba or UO degrees accepted? Yes, absolutely. Um, can my uncle, who is a Canadian citizen, show a sponsor letter for me with finances? Yes, that is possible, but it has to be there are lots of nuances around that. So yes, I can say yes, the long and short is it's possible, but there's quite a bit of documentation that will be required and very specific. So ensure that you have a relevant guidance where that's concerned, because finances is very important. As I showed you on the reasons for refusal, that's one of the main ones. So you want to make sure that that's done properly. Excuse me. Okay, so how soon after spouse and child join if study permit application was done solely? There's no particular timeline. You at the time that you're doing it, you just have to qualify for the spouse, for example, right? You just have to make sure that you qualify, but there's no specific timeline as to when they can join you. Like we had a client who we did his study permit application, and he did his application in December. He came to Canada um in January to start his program. And then right after he came, he expressed an interest in bringing his spouse here. So he wanted us to do his spousal work permit. We're now in May. We did a spousal work permit, I believe, last month. They approved it pretty quick. They did it in April. So that was like 3 months after he came. We actually started the process before that, but we didn't get to submit the application until in April. And yeah, they were approved, and his wife is I'm not sure if she's here yet. I know they got the work permit, but the plan is for her to come and join him soon. So that happened like within the span of 3 months. So there's no set timeline. As long as you qualify, and you can produce the relevant documents, you can. Let's see what else here. Quite a bit of questions. Um, After finishing my program, can my family return to Canada when I am applying for permanent residency? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, your family will be included on your permanent residency application, right? When you're applying, by default, they would be included. Um, can work permit be obtained while studying? Yes. So remember by default, right? With as long as you're doing a qualifying program, um, you you can work, right? So you can work by default as long as your program is eligible. That work term or that work hours will be to a max of 24 hours per week. So in the case where the program you're interested in is 12 months but it's not eligible for PGWP, that would be my first flag. I would say don't do it, but let me continue. Is it possible to just apply for standard work permit at the end of your pro? No, it's not. And that's where the challenge comes in. And that's why it's not recommended. So if your program is like with, not post-grad work permit eligible, you're gonna have a challenge at the end applying for a work permit. Like, how do you do that? I've seen a lot of cases one of the clients that we're working with right now, she's in that exact same situation, and we're trying to get her into a postgrad work permit eligible program. So it's like additional spending. You go through one program that's not qualifying, and then now you're going to have to spend again to go through another program. Um, and I've seen a lot of people who have had to leave Canada at the end and go home because they finished their programs and no option. So no, I would not recommend. But it's yeah, I would not recommend. Recommendations for website where I can be able to access more information related to Canada's universities, colleges. Send us an email. We actually do have a database. One of our partner database that we have, and that's what we also use. You can use it to do research into universities, colleges in Canada. You can use it to apply to multiple institutions without having to go to their individual websites to apply. And lots of information. You can compare programs and tuition and so on. So you could shoot me an email about that. I was refused a visitor's visa on grounds of insufficient travel history, not enough home ties, and insufficient funds. Yeah, yeah, that's common. That's where that visa refusal management service that I mentioned would come in. Um, we see those every day, and it's through that service that we help you to overcome that refusal. Somebody's asking about a dependent parent. A dependent parent would not necessarily qualify because they don't meet the definition of a family member. But if you want a parent to come with you to Canada, they would just need to have either a visitor's visa or an electronic travel authorization if they're from a visa exempt country. Um, can I try more than one pathway? Yes, you can. Absolutely. Uh, so I won't be able to answer all questions today. I see there's quite a bit here. Some of your questions, do we have a work program outside of studying? Yes, there is, but that's not what we touched on today. Yes, there is. Canada has a temporary foreign worker program. All right, guys, I'm gonna take one more. I see there's quite a bit here. Um, I'm a registered nurse. I think I touched on that one already in the comments. All right, so I have a BA in accounting, completing level 3 ACCA. I have a 3-year-old and I'm married. Husband has a background in construction, looking at completing a program at Nova Scotia College. Any advice? Well, I would say it depends on the program. I would be interested to know which program you'll be completing in Nova Scotia, and then also like what your plans are, where your spouse and child is concerned. Is it that they're going to be accompanying you to Canada initially? Um, if that's the case, which program are you doing at Nova Scotia? Because it's as if that's your goal, I don't think a program at Nova Scotia College would be the right one if you're thinking of bringing your family along with you at the same time. Okay, guys. Um, Yeah, tons of questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we will be sending out a link with the replay of the session. And then if you have additional questions, you can do one of two things. You can go ahead and use the code to schedule a consultation. Like I said, it's only available for 24 hours. My contact details are on the screen. So you can also reach out to us. You can send us an email and my team will respond to you and we'll provide you with as much guidance as we can. And thank you for joining this evening. I trust, ooh, I see there's quite a bit. Um, the code the code is webinar special. It's on the screen, so it's webinar special. Um, yeah, I see there's quite a bit of you with comments and questions. Thank you for joining. Thank you for participating. I trust that you found the information insightful, and feel free to reach out to myself or my team if you're looking for support with your Canadian immigration application. Thank you. Have a good night and take care.